America is short tens of thousands of doctors, and Congress spent its hearing fighting over whether diversity programs are the fix or the problem. The dean struck back hard. Here's the hearing on how America trains its doctors, then the full breakdown.
Dr. Hargood, under questioning from Ms. Miller, you said, quote, "The vast majority of pregnancies are in women," end quote. Who has the other pregnancies?
It's possible for transgender people.
So wait, so your testimony is, again, so transgender people? I thought a transgender woman was a woman. So you said the vast majority of pregnancies are in women. So who are the other pregnancies?
They don't recognize themselves as a woman.
What?
You heard what I said. They don't transgender.
So there are people who are pregnant who are just use your made-up language.
Rare event.
Transgender. Who are the other people who are pregnant in your kooky worldview? You said the vast majority of pregnancies are in women. Who are the other pregnancies in?
A transgender person.
A transgender person. Okay, so if you don't even understand this, by the way, the answer I presume in your kooky language would be a transgender man. I don't know why you won't just admit that. Why won't you just say because a transgender woman would be a man who's pretending to be a woman. So why won't you even say the truth in your own screwed up view of the world, that the other pregnancies are transgender men? Why won't you just say that?
I'm happy to say that.
Okay, so say it.
Transgender men.
Transgender men get pregnant. That is your view. So, okay, that's insane. Dr. Dubinet, I want to remind, we learned last committee hearing lying under oath or lying while in Congress is against the law, so I'd point that out before I ask you these questions. Do you think that people dying in the name of DEI is okay?
What do you mean by dying in the name of DEI?
If instituting DEI leads to people dying, is that okay? I'm going to assume your answer is no. This is an opinion question. Is it okay to kill people because we're so determined to be diverse that we take unqualified people and we put them into our institutions? Is that okay?
Well, I take exception to the premise.
All right, well then I'm going to move on. You said that it is against the law to use race as a form of admissions at your institution, correct?
In the state of California.
Okay. And you also said it's your policy that you don't take race into consideration in your admissions, correct?
As far as I know, I'm not directly involved with that.
So how would you explain in 2023 two races of students at your school had 3.8 GPAs when they got in, or in the 88th percentile in terms of their MCAT scores, and two other races of students are 20 basis points behind and 20 points behind 68th percentile in their MCAT scores? How can you explain that if race isn't taken into account?
Sir, you've concluded causality between two sets of facts, and I don't think we can do that.
Well, I'm asking what other factors could it be then? I'm asking for an explanation. Why would one group of people have dramatically lower MCAT scores and GPAs than another group of people, yet they're all admitted if you have a race-blind admissions policy? How could that happen?
Because there are a number of other factors that are involved.
So are you aware that Jennifer Lucero has been accused by other people in the admissions department for pushing unqualified minority candidates to diversify the school? Have you heard these claims?
I will not be discussing things that are under current litigation.
Have you heard the claim?
And I will not be discussing individual faculty or students.
I just asked if you've heard the claim, not an opinion on have you heard the claim? I presume the answer to that is yes. Would it concern you if the claim were true? Not asking you whether it is or not. Would that concern you if the claim were true?
I'm not discussing individual
Okay,
faculty.
so you're going to come here and not answer our questions. Look, last question I'll have to you is this. At your institution, in another class that you have right now, after you changed everything because of the previous baloney class, you've got race, science, and hate, the case for anti-Semitism. Students appear to be taught that the birth of anti-Semitism was relatively recent, happening only 200 years ago. Do you agree with that? Is anti-Semitism a recent phenomenon or something
that, of
that's
course,
lasted
is
a long
not
time?
true.
Okay, good. Thank you for saying that. And do all of you, final question, agree as it relates to anti-Semitism, your institutions need to do a lot better job moving forward than they have in the past? I'll ask you, Dr. Dubinet, yes or no?
We're doing a lot in the area of anti-Semitism, and we
Better now.
we stand against anti-Semitism strongly. And as I said in my opening statement, these issues I take very personally, as that all of the issues resonate with me personally, and that my family, not all of my family, escaped Europe during the Holocaust.
Understood. And I'm out of time, so I'm not going to ask the other two. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Benedetti, the University of Illinois, in August of health system, in August of 2025, suspended transgender surgery on minors. Can you share with us what led to that decision?
We followed the directive of the presidential order immediately without any delay.
Excellent. Now, did the University of Illinois health system also stop prescribing puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to youth experiencing gender dysphoria?
That was my recommendation.
Okay. Has the University of Illinois done so?
I will check on it. And
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you could get back to us on that, that would be excellent. Because yes, I think we knew about pausing surgeries on minors, but it is equally critical to end puberty blockers and wrong-sex hormones in these children, and that was also the subject of executive action by the president very early in his term. In fact, in doing so, and I commend the University of Illinois, at least in pausing the surgeries, because we know these procedures can cause long-term irreversible effects. The girl who has her breasts removed will never be able to breastfeed her children. Puberty blockers can lead to bone problems and of course, osteoporosis. And of course, the plan when a child is launched on this path of puberty blockers is generally then cross-sex hormones, which can lead to infertility, to numerous urogynecologic problems, metabolic problems, cardiovascular problems long-term, all with very little to no evidence of any psychological benefit. In fact, the best study to date, as I see it, is the Finnish study that showed that girls who are transitioned have 2.5-fold higher serious mental health problems after transition than before, and boys who are transitioned have 6 times the serious mental health problems than boys who are not transitioned. So, again, please do get back to us on where the University of Illinois stands right now on
Absolutely.
puberty blockers and wrong-sex hormones for these poor children who need our psychological and emotional support. Often they're victims of abuse. They're children on the autism spectrum. They have depression. They have anxiety. They need support, and they don't need to be permanently mutilated. Dr. Hawgood, the University of California, San Francisco offers a clinical rotation for residents and students on, quote, transgender medicine, where learners are placed at a transgender clinic that provides cross-sex hormones. Your website boasts that the program teaches medical students to prescribe cross-sex hormones and refer for transgender surgeries. Does this training program instruct, does this training program instruct medical students and residents to do these things and to make surgery referrals on minors?
The program doesn't instruct medical students or residents to do anything. It teaches them transgender health. Roughly 1% of the American population is transgender, and we take it as a strong responsibility to provide the best possible health care.
And from your website, this talks about transgender, but it doesn't talk specifically about pediatric and adults. Is it pediatric and adult both?
We have transgender programs for both pediatrics and adults. We do not do surgery under the age of 18.
Okay.
And we abide by federal and state law, as well as the recommendations of 35 professional associations in North America.
Well, then you are ignoring the HHS, you are ignoring the UK, you are ignoring Finland, ignoring Sweden, ignoring...
It's not a program that I am an expert in.
Okay.
But those clinicians that focus on this area are continuously evaluating international literature in this field.
But you are involving medical students.
I'm sorry, my eyesight is,
Okay.
even with glasses, is not very
Okay,
good.
but your transgender clinic does continue to give puberty blockers and wrong sex hormones to children.
Correct.
Okay, that is in violation of federal law.
Not law.
It is in violation of multiple administrative policies. Do you bill Medicaid for the same?
It is my understanding that CMS...
Gentleman's time has expired.
First of all, a comment on general DEI. I suggest a good book for people to read on the topic is America's Cultural Revolution by Christopher Rufo. In it, he lays out that the goal of the people who push this DEI is to destroy America as we know it. Okay, they want to make sure when people vote or deal with their government, rather than looking on whose policy they like more on tax policy or transportation policy or military policy. They want America in which you say, what are you going to do for me because I'm Pacific Islander? What are you going to do for me because I'm Native American? They want to forever do that to Americans, and when they succeed in that, it'll be the end of America. The second thing I want to point out is it was said by someone on the Democrat side there that it's always good to break down barriers of admission to universities. When breaking down barriers means you lower the standards, it means a college degree means less, or a medical degree means less. That should be obvious, and that's not a good thing. The other thing, before I ask a question, Mr. Hallgood, is I'm appalled that you would do trans surgeries on an 18 or 19-year-old. You know, people change their mind about these things, and just because it's legal and you can make money at it doesn't make it right. I cannot imagine a situation in which you would take an 18 or 19-year-old and do one of these sex change operations when you should know very well that a significant number of these people change what their feelings are. Now, the first general question we will take Mr. Dubinet. Classes in your university cover environmental justice, housing and justice, anti-settler colonialism, disability justice. One of the concerns that some of us has is the complete lack of diversity in universities with regard to faculty. As far as the people who teach these classes subjectively, I mean, America's divided about half Republican, half Democrat. Do you think the people who teach these classes are like half Republican, half Democrat, or do you think there's an ideological bias there?
Congressman, I don't know about the political stance of or political party of any of our faculty.
Do you think common sense would tell you that people who teach these classes you lack ideological diversity among the faculty, or do you not even care?
I just have not been in the practice of asking our faculty what political party they endorse.
Okay, now I'm sorry I got to go to a meeting, but that is a major concern I have in these classes. I don't think they reflect a cross-section of America and faculty. I think they are left-wing faculty, and I think that medical students required to take classes from these people is appalling, but thank you.
Let me just say this, I believe the most important consideration for the student in medical school is medical competency in achieving good health outcomes. Time spent in medical school focusing on subjects that do not improve patient outcomes not only is a disservice to the student, to the potential doctor, but it's dangerous depending on for those depending on the medical knowledge and expertise of these future doctors. Doctors Hargood and Bennett, I'm sorry if I messed that up. Would you both agree that medical science knowledge is the most important competency for medical schools to impart into the students? Yes or no?
Yes, we are very focused on the scientific basis of medicine. I would repeat that the course that we are discussing represented less than 2%.
Okay, I just want to real quick yes or no because I have a couple questions here.
I agree with my colleague.
Okay. Dr. Dubinet, did UCLA's Structural Racism and Health Equity course prepare students for licensing exams, yes or no?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Dr. Hogwood, good. Did UCFS Justice and Advocacy and Medicine course prepare students for license exams?
There were no grades given in that course, so it had no influence on the
But the course was given then? Okay.
Sorry?
The course was given then, I'm correct?
The course was given, it has been discontinued.
Okay. For both of you, were all the sessions and the classes I just mentioned based on peer review evidence?
Sorry, go ahead.
We evaluated the course and based on our task force examination of the results, we eliminated the course and began a new course in its place.
Okay, good.
The lack of evidence base was one of the reasons the course was discontinued.
Okay.
I would like to make the point, though, we're treating the course as a holistic issue. There were classes in the course that were concerning. Teaching students the social drivers of health, including structural racism, I believe is a very important part of our curriculum.
Okay, all right. This kind of drifting back into the point of saying, are we going to teach medicine? Or are we teaching social concepts? So I'm going to list subjects that were taught previously in these classes. I'd like to know whether UCSF or UCLA medical schools still teach these subjects today. Again, answer yes or no. Settler colonization.
Today, no.
White fragility.
Today, no.
Both of you?
No.
Okay. Fat phobia.
I'm not aware that that was in our curriculum, but we certainly don't teach it today.
Okay.
No.
We talked about this earlier, the Black Panther Party. And we're talking about medical school, by the way. Just want to make sure I reemphasize that again. The Black Panther Party, is that still being taught?
No.
Queer liberation.
We teach LGBTQ health-specific issues in our course, and we'll continue to. Not necessarily using that particular term.
The same thing applies for UCLA.
Prison abolition.
Again, we will continue to teach prison health because our students...
Prison abolition, not health.
Not abolition, no.
Not abolition, no.
Border abolition.
No.
Okay. I think and I'm glad we're getting here. We have to figure out how to make sure we never, ever get delinked from common sense. I have a cousin as a physician, have a son-in-law as an ER doctor. I was studying to be a marine biologist one day. To see what we're now teaching for those who are trying to understand how to help the human body, help the human person, I'm glad we're getting, again, away from that at this point. So that being said, thank goodness we're moving on from that. You're back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you who are serving on the panel today. I appreciated the opportunity of reading your testimonies in advance and of coming to the hearing today. Last year, the Department of Health and Human Services released a 410-page comprehensive review of medical intervention for children and adolescents with gender dysphoria. This report notes an increased reliance on so-called gender-affirming care as the treatment for children questioning their sex despite known health concerns, including infertility, adverse effects on bone health and cardiovascular function, and negative impacts on brain development. Along with HHS's report, we've seen the American Medical Association and the American Society of Plastic Surgeons actually shift from their earlier positions by issuing updated guidance, clarifying that the evidence for surgical interventions in minors is insufficient. Following HHS's report and position changes by large medical associations in the United States, I've got several really just yes or no questions for the medical school deans that we have sitting here before us today. So if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me with yes or no to these questions. Regarding sex trait altering surgeries on minors, does your medical school teach that these procedures are ever appropriate? And I'll start with Dr. Dubinette, yes or no?
To the best of my knowledge, we do not.
Okay, Dr. Hallgood?
We do not provide surgery under the age of 18.
Okay, Dr. Benedetti?
We do not provide surgery under age 18.
Okay. Does your medical school offer these procedures through its own clinics to minors? Yes or no? Dr.
To my
Dubinette?
best of my knowledge, no.
No,
We do not offer surgery.
you do not. Benedetti?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Has your hospital or medical school ever offered these procedures to minors?
This is not within my area of jurisdiction in the health system, but I actually don't know the answer to that in the historical past.
Dr. Hallgood?
I also would, if you're saying ever, I would need to confirm the answer to that.
Okay. And Dr. Benedetti?
We did perform before the presidential order. We stopped after the presidential order.
Oh, okay. So another one, has any provider at your hospital or medical school ever referred or provided letters of support or recommendation for minors for these procedures to other entities? Dr. Dubinette?
I have no knowledge of that.
Okay, Dr. Hallgood?
I also don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, and Dr. Benedetti?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Also for the record, in your view, are sex trait altering surgeries for minors ever medically necessary? Dr. Dubinette?
This is not within my area of expertise, and UCLA has, as far as I know, has completely stopped doing surgeries for minors.
Okay, Dr. Hallgood, in your view, are sex trait altering surgeries for minors ever medically necessary?
My view is not relevant here because I'm not an expert and I don't treat these patients, but our policy is not to offer these procedures under the age of 18.
Okay, and Dr. Benedetti, to you?
Yeah, we don't offer this procedure, and of course I'm not an expert of it.
Okay. My follow-up to that was, if so, do you believe that parental consent must be received before any sex trait altering surgery is performed on a minor? Dr. Dubinette?
Parental consent is always required.
Always required, okay. Dr. Hallgood?
We don't do the procedure, but yes, I'm a pediatrician, so I strongly believe in parental consent.
Okay, Dr. Benedetti?
Illinois law mandate parental consent.
Okay, very good. Let me come back to Dr. Dubinette with one quick question. When Americans need care from medical professionals, their first thought is not about a doctor's belief in woke ideologies or political activism. Their only concern is whether their doctor has the expertise to treat them when they have the flu, a broken bone, as I'm dealing with, or even life-threatening ailments. Unfortunately, we've seen medical schools across the country put ideologues in charge of the medical school admissions, and these individuals put academic excellence and merit aside in favor of candidates who will further activism in the profession. Dr. Dubinette, the Justice Department Civil Rights Division recently announced its findings that UCLA illegally used race in medical school admissions, and they want to come to a voluntary resolution with UCLA on this issue. Is UCLA currently engaged in discussions with the DOJ about this agreement?
I'm not able to talk about ongoing litigation here.
Okay. Well, the DOJ indicated that UCLA's Medical School's Associate Dean of Admissions, Jennifer Lucero, used intimidation and shaming tactics to pressure the admissions committee to unlawfully consider race. And last question, I'm done. Is there ever a time?
Gentleman's time has expired.
Okay.
I have to move on.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Wahlberg, and this is an important hearing. Obviously, this country is celebrating 250 years, and of course, that 250 years is based on merit, hard work, and certainly education. And we built an incredible healthcare system in this country on that basis. The Constitution also guarantees lots of liberties, freedom. And Dr. Hauge, do you recall that during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was controversy about restrictions on public gatherings at your medical school?
Yes, we had a stay-in-place order, first by the mayor of San Francisco and then by the governor of California.
Do you recall that religious services were under severe constraints at the time?
You know, I lead a healthcare university. I don't stray into political issues that are unrelated to healthcare. I'm superficially aware of the controversy, but not in any detail.
Are you aware in 2020 that UCSF School of Medicine appeared to sign an open letter supporting the large-scale Black Lives Matter protests during this time? UCF's current Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost, Catherine Lucy, also appeared to sign on to this letter by name. Did UCSF make any statement at the time about the need to also relax restrictions on other gatherings?
I don't have the document that you are referring to in front of me, and I would need to see it to make a specific answer to your question.
Well, I hope you can see why the average American would lose trust in medical institutions like yours when they discover that these institutions are calling for one set of rules for one political group, but another set of rules for church services.
Without the documents, I can't make that connection.
When you get briefed on this, I think an apology from your institution will be in order. Again, our Constitution requires freedom, particularly religious freedom, and you might want to apologize to...
I understand the Constitution requires religious freedom, and to my knowledge, there's nothing that we have done now or in the past that would be in contradiction to that.
Okay. Well, like I said, when you get briefed on this, then for the record, I would ask you to respond appropriately. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see we have many medical schools from California represented today. I'm sure all of you are aware, as administrators from medical schools in California, that California excludes race as a consideration for admission. Do you have that understanding, Dr. Dubonnet?
Yes, I do. Proposition 209, and we followed that since its inception.
Dr. Hargood?
Yes, it was passed in 1996, and for the last 30 years we have followed that mandate.
Dr. Benedetti, you're aware of that California law says that, that race cannot be considered as part of admissions for medical schools?
I apologize, I don't, but I learned it today.
Okay, so, but it's been long-standing for decades, actually, in California. We don't have race as a consideration. Forgive me, I don't, but Dr. Dubonnet, you maybe can help me. I seem to remember that Tay-Sachs disease affects a particular population, predominantly. Can you tell me which population it affects?
It's not in my area of expertise, so I can't really.
Does anyone can comment on that? Which doctor before me?
It's more prevalent in Ashkenazi Jews.
And Ashkenazi Jews, very particular part of the Jewish community. Anybody familiar with never smoker lung cancer?
Yes, I am. That's one of the areas of my own research.
Can you tell us which population groups seem to be affected by this predominantly?
Well, we have known for some years now that particularly young Asian women may have an increased propensity.
Yes. But not exclusively. They don't. It's not exclusively to that population, but there's an increased propensity among young Asian women.
That's correct.
And the fact that they can't get the current guidance doesn't allow insurance companies to pay for screenings at that age because they've never smoked. Because that's what the guidance says. You have to have several years of smoker history. They're in this conundrum that they have to pay extra. And so that could be kind of considered a social determinant of health there. Is that right?
Correct, and there are ongoing studies now to actually evaluate this prospectively, and the early results suggest that there will be scientific fact to help make the decisions about that reimbursement.
So there's in fact science that could drive this. Is research in this area going to potentially have impacts beyond young Asian women to understand why young Asian women may be predominantly impacted? Could inquiry into this area also have benefits to the broader population?
Yes, it will, and I think one of the very important things we're doing is beginning to use what we now consider to be diagnostic tests to be prediction tests. And what we're finding is that, for example, small particle air pollution is a very important risk factor, and studies have found if I live in a high polluted area with that kind of pollution for more than 3 years, it can be equivalent to heavy smoking. And I'm sorry to say that 7 of the top 10 cities with small particle air pollution in the country are in California.
So I'm also hearing stuff about young people. There's a troubling trend among young people getting cancer. So it's not young Asian women I'm talking about, but young people in general. Does it cut across all races?
Yes, we're finding that we need to learn more about the genetic underpinning of early cancer in younger people. And all of that is actively under investigation. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to use the new tools that are being developed to predict risk in a way that we would be able to treat risk, sometimes called prevention, but I call it treating risk because prevention has not worked out well because of the inability to discern risk at a high level.
So it is a case in California that race is excluded as far as admission to medical school, but it turns out that being able to say young Asian woman, to be able to say young people, to say this particularly affects women, to say this affects Ashkenazi Jews in particular, that these are very important things to be free to talk about and to be able to write and grant applications. Would you agree with me, Dr. Dubonnet?
I do.
Dr. Hargood?
I do.
Dr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Benedetti?
I do.
I wish I could talk about sickle cell anemia. I wish I could talk about all different forms of very specific medical conditions that require diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not an attack on them. I yield back.
The committee will please come to order. Quorum is present. The committee meets today pursuant to notice. Without objection, the chair may recess the committee at any point. Last August, the Education and Workforce Committee opened investigations into 3 medical schools before us today. We had received repeated complaints of severe anti-Semitism from students and faculty on these campuses, and we wanted to understand what was causing it. It soon became clear that the pervasive anti-Semitism we were investigating was the result of a deeper problem. It was a result of the activist infrastructure that these medical schools themselves had constructed. This infrastructure puts people into categories based on race and identity rather than judging people as individuals. It also incites anti-Semitism among other hatreds by labeling Jews as white and therefore privileged and oppressors. That same ideology has shaped admission policies, hiring practices, and even curricula. For example, in May, the Justice Department found that UCLA Medical School intentionally admitted applicants based on race, trading merit for DEI. UCLA is not alone. On now removed web pages, UC San Francisco touted its increasing numbers for residents who they claim are, quote, underrepresented in medicine, end quote. Similarly, departments across the University of Illinois College of Medicine have pledged year after year to increase their proportion of certain medical students, residents, and faculty. But admissions were only the beginning. DEI became part of the curriculum at these medical schools. For example, UCLA Medical School and the University of San Francisco School of Medicine require students to take classes indoctrinating them in settler, colonialist, anti-oppression nonsense. These classes are filled with propaganda. They do not prepare medical students to become qualified, skilled physicians. And I repeat, these courses do not prepare medical students to become qualified, skilled physicians. They're focused on topics that have nothing to do with medical science because they seek to make medical students not into competent doctors, but into far-left activists. UCLA and UCSF have admitted as much to the committee. UCSF told the committee that its required DEI class, and I quote, did not meet UCSF standards, end quote. Specifically, the course did not meet, and I quote, benchmarks for student reviews and did not align with graduation competencies or milestones. UCLA also told the committee that its DEI course is, quote, no longer offered after a review of the first-year curriculum, end quote. Both schools are now offering replacement courses, which I worry will be just more of the same. It's clear that we need to spend some time today learning how those courses made their way into the curriculum in the first place. Today's hearing is about accountability. Today's hearing can be emotional, frustrating, encouraging, discouraging, all of the above, depending on how we, the committee, work it out together. And I put that emphasis on together, even with the differences and the viewpoints. We'll be asking some difficult questions about these medical schools and the choices that they've made. We'll be asking things like, why are you prioritizing politics over medical education? Why are you perpetuating anti-Semitism and discrimination? Why are you turning doctors into activists? We look forward to hearing your testimony. I thank the gentleman. And again, I thank the panel for being here. It's been helpful to hear your answers. I think we've seen some encouraging statements. We've heard some discouraging statements as well. It is our hope that there are other medical schools who were hunkered down by their television screens today watching what was going on as well. Because the three that were here because of a purpose, because of some notoriety that had gone on, some concerns brought, in fact, the genesis of this hearing. The genesis of this hearing came about from members of our Congressional Doctors Caucus coming to me with significant concerns about what was going on in their own medical schools that they had graduated from. And so that was the primary purpose today. And I think it was an important purpose. I know there's disagreement coming from both one side of the aisle, even the point of this being a useless waste of time. That member was here, though, to ask questions. It's our responsibility as stewards of taxpayer dollars to confront the widespread culture of discrimination and activist ideology that has taken over some of our most elite medical schools. My philosophy of oversight is to ensure that our federal dollars get spent in ways that advance the American project. And that project is a continuing project, never perfect, but moving toward perfection, in ways that prepare students to join the citizenry in their profession, not in ways that discriminate against people based upon the color of their skin, or their sex, or where they come from, their ideology, or any other difference. I would make it very clear that this side of the aisle, the majority, does not fear diversity. We want to promote true diversity. We don't see diversity or inclusion as dirty words in a full understanding of what they actually mean. That we have an emphasis on unique concerns, medical and otherwise, and we address those, but we do that with full science in the background. As you've heard today, DEI across these schools advanced a dangerous ideology. And we hope that the words that were given today are true, that no longer some of those courses or even faculty in your medical schools. Across our country, prioritizing politics over education has resulted in classes teaching the sort of propaganda we heard about today, indoctrinating students at the expense of preparing future doctors to meet the health care needs of our communities. That can't be allowed to persist, and that type of DEI has to be ripped out at the roots. There was a statement made during the course of our questioning today that we cannot reduce the cost of medical education. That's why the Working Families Tax Cut bill was passed and signed into law. One of the key reasons to reduce the cost, the unnecessary cost of education, medical and otherwise, to put the downward pressure. The audacity to say that it can't be reduced is absurd. And that's keeping deserving students out of having a medical education, more than probably anything else. A deserving student will be able to receive additional help if necessary to find that education at any of your schools or any other medical school. And I think that'll be proven. But I tell you what, not only the medical schools that may have been listening today and watching today, I know that there are citizens out there that have great concerns about the cost of higher education, but also the threat that comes from a diversity that is manufactured, that goes away from true diversity, and inclusion that ends up in exclusion of multiple groups in society. The concern about the cost in higher education and in medical education research, when we had opportunities to hear an answer to a question that was asked in a biological way, a scientific way, whether a non-biological woman has had a baby or could have a uterus. Unbelievable that answer was given in an unscientific way. And the mealy-mouthed answer that was given by noted medical professionals. The general public hearing that today says this hearing was valuable because it was absurd that answer could not be given directly. And unscientific information was stood by. And so, we will continue trying to enhance the education in this country, a country that has the ability to have the best medicine in the world without being the most costly as well.
Let's break down a House Education and Workforce hearing on a charged subject, the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, DEI, in America's medical schools. Members and medical school deans went back and forth, but underneath the heat was one question almost everyone actually shares. How do we train the best possible doctors? They just disagreed sharply about whether these programs help or hurt that goal. Here's the split. One side, led by the Republican members, argue that DEI programs risk lowering standards, injecting ideology into medicine, and judging future doctors by identity rather than ability. The other side, and the deans, argue that these programs widen the pool of talent, improve care for patients, and do not lower the bar. A fair check has to take both seriously. So set the two lenses side by side. The merit lens asks whether these programs compromise the competence of doctors. The access lens asks whether a more diverse profession delivers better care to more patients. This breakdown checks each against the evidence, not the volume of the exchange. And one honest problem to name up front. The word DEI means very different things to different people. To one member, it means lowering an admission score. To a dean, it means a scholarship or a mentoring program. To a third person, it means a specific training module. A lot of the shouting in this hearing was people arguing past each other about the same three letters. Start with what almost everyone in the room agreed on, because it's the ground both arguments are built on. Here's the anchor. The United States faces a projected shortage of tens of thousands of physicians in the coming years, and it falls hardest on rural and lower-income communities where too few doctors choose to practice. Everyone in the hearing agreed the country needs more good doctors in more places. The fight is only about how to get them. So keep that in mind as the fight unfolds. This isn't a debate between people who want competent doctors and people who don't. Both sides say patient safety and physician quality come first. The real disagreement is empirical, whether these particular programs make the doctor pipeline better or worse. That's a question you can actually check against evidence. It also helps to know why this hearing is happening now. After a landmark 2023 Supreme Court ruling reshaped college admissions, and amid a broad political push against DEI programs generally, medical schools became a natural flashpoint because the stakes are so high and the training pipeline is long. So this is one hearing inside a much larger national argument. And here's a piece of the shortage most people miss. It isn't only about how many students get into medical school, it's about where they end up. The number of residency training slots is capped, and new doctors tend to settle near where they train, which is why so few land in rural areas. Any honest fix has to touch that pipeline, not just admissions. One more bit of context both sides invoke: the crushing cost. Medical school can leave a new doctor with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, which pushes many toward higher-paying specialties in cities and away from primary care in the places that need it most. Money, not just merit or diversity, quietly shapes who becomes what kind of doctor and where. And there's a fix that barely came up but probably matters more than the whole DEI fight: residency slots. The number of federally funded training positions has been tightly capped for decades, which bottlenecks the entire supply of doctors no matter who gets into medical school. Expanding it has quiet bipartisan support, and it would do more for the shortage than almost anything argued about in that room. The country also leans heavily on doctors trained abroad. A large share of U.S. physicians, especially in rural and underserved areas, are international medical graduates who fill gaps. American-trained doctors don't. It's a reminder that the pipeline is bigger and more tangled than any single admissions policy, and that the shortage is being patched from several directions at once. Now the critics' case, carried by members like Burgess Owens and Randy Fine. It centers on one word: merit. The core worry is straightforward and reasonable on its face. When you're choosing who gets to become a surgeon, ability should come first, because the stakes are life and death. Critics argue that if admissions weight background heavily, a school could admit a student with weaker academic numbers over a stronger one. Stated that way, it's a concern most people would take seriously. There's a real legal backdrop here, too. In 2023, the Supreme Court struck down race-conscious college admissions, and that ruling applies to medical schools as well. So schools are now legally barred from using race as a direct factor, and part of this hearing was members asking whether the schools are truly complying or just relabeling the same practices. But here's where the fact check tightens the claim. On the data, students admitted to medical school across different backgrounds go on to pass their board exams and become licensed doctors at high rates. There is not good evidence that today's graduates are less competent. So the honest version of the merit worry is about the admissions process, not proof of worse doctors coming out the other end. A lot of the admissions fight runs through one test, the MCAT, the standardized exam for medical school. Critics treat a high score as the clearest measure of merit. Defenders note the score predicts first-year grades and board passage reasonably well, but far from perfectly, and that plenty of excellent doctors had middling scores. So the test matters, but treating it as the sole definition of merit is itself a contested claim. There's also a fairness wrinkle in the numbers. Test scores track family income closely, because wealthier students can afford prep courses and testing time. So a pure score-only system isn't neutral either. It quietly favors applicants who could pay for an edge. That doesn't settle the debate, but it complicates the idea that a single number is the same thing as pure merit. Congressman Randy Fine's exchange with the deans was the most heated of the day, pressing them hard and fast on specifics. Sharp questioning is the job, and it exposed places where the deans gave vague answers. The fair note is that a tense back and forth reveals who can defend their program in detail and who can't, but a raised voice by itself doesn't decide who's right on the underlying facts. A subtler critic argument is worth stating fairly, the mismatch idea, that admitting a student to a program tougher than their preparation can set them up to struggle. It's a real hypothesis that scholars have debated for years, with evidence on both sides and no clear consensus. In medicine specifically, the high board pass rates cut against the strong version of it, but it's a serious argument, not a talking point. Congressman Glenn Groffman pressed a different angle, ideology in the curriculum, the concern that required training modules push a particular political worldview rather than medicine. This is harder to fact-check because it varies enormously school to school. The fair, narrow point is that a required course's content is a legitimate thing for oversight to ask about, and specifics matter more than the label. Congressman Bob Bonder raised the most contested subject of the day, how medicine handles gender-related care for minors. We'll be careful and brief here because it is a genuinely unsettled area of medicine, law, and ethics, with major institutions and courts still in open disagreement. The checkable point is only that it is contested, and that reasonable, credentialed people land on different sides. Congressman Rick Allen tied it back to the exam room, arguing that what matters to a patient is competence, not a doctor's demographics. It's an intuitive point. The counter-argument, which we'll get to, isn't that demographics beat competence. It's that, among equally competent doctors, a more varied profession can reach more patients. Both can be true, and the hearing often blurred them. Now the other side, carried by Congressman Mark Takano and the deans, who argued the critics are aiming at the wrong target. Their central claim rests on research. Studies have found that when patients and doctors share a background, communication and trust can improve, and patients are sometimes more likely to follow through on care. The strongest evidence is around access, getting doctors to practice in the underserved communities they came from, which is exactly where the shortage bites hardest. The single strongest finding for their side is about geography. Doctors who grow up in rural or underserved areas are far more likely to return and practice there after training. So a pipeline that reaches those students isn't charity. It's one of the few things that reliably gets physicians into the exact places with the worst shortages. That's a practical argument, not an ideological one. The deans also leaned on history. For much of the past century, many qualified applicants were formally shut out of medicine because of who they were, and the profession is still working to widen from that narrow base. Their argument is that today's programs are less about preference and more about undoing a very recent, very real exclusion. You can weigh that differently, but the history itself is not in dispute. It's worth being precise about what these programs usually are. In practice, most medical school DEI efforts are things like scholarships, mentoring, outreach to rural and first-generation students, and bias training for bedside manner. Reasonable people can debate any one of them, but the everyday reality is closer to recruitment and support than to the dramatic picture the word conjures. And holistic admissions, the dean stressed, isn't new or radical. Selective schools of every kind have long looked beyond a single number, weighing character, hardship, and service alongside grades, on the theory that a good doctor needs more than a high score. Whether a given school does it well is fair to question. The method itself is mainstream and decades old. The dean's defense of admissions was specific. They said they look at the whole applicant, grades and scores plus resilience, service, and background, and that they never admit someone unqualified. Holistic review, they argued, isn't lowering the bar, it's reading more of the page. Whether you buy that depends on the details, but it's a coherent, mainstream description of how modern admissions work. Congressman Takano's sharpest move was to press for specifics, asking members to name the exact program or policy they objected to rather than the blanket term DEI. It's an effective tactic because a scholarship for rural students and a controversial training module are very different things, and lumping them together lets everyone avoid the actual details. Congressman Harris, questioning the deans, pushed on measurement. If a program exists, what does it actually accomplish, and how would you know? It's a fair demand of any program, and it's one defenders should welcome rather than dodge. A good policy can survive the question, what are the results? A weak one hides from it. That request for evidence applies equally to both sides of this fight. It's also worth asking what patients themselves actually want, since they're the point of all this. Surveys are consistent and unsurprising. People overwhelmingly want a competent doctor they can communicate with and trust. Competence and connection aren't rivals in the exam room. They're both part of good care. Most of this hearing was really a fight over how best to produce both. So weigh the access case fairly. The evidence that a more varied profession improves access for underserved patients is real and reasonably strong. The evidence that it improves raw clinical outcomes for everyone is more mixed and still debated. So the defenders are on solid ground about access, and on softer ground when the claim stretches to all outcomes everywhere. There's also a quiet lever behind this whole fight that came up repeatedly: who accredits medical schools and who funds them. Here's why the members had standing to ask it all. Medical schools depend on an accreditor to certify them and on federal dollars for research and training. Both come with strings, and in recent years, the accreditor's diversity-related standards became a target, with pressure to drop them. So Congress isn't a bystander here. Through funding and oversight, it has real influence over what schools must do. And that cuts both ways, which is the honest part. The same levers that could strip out programs a member dislikes could also be used to pressure schools in the other direction under a different Congress. Whichever side you're on, handing politicians a bigger dial over medical training is a power that outlasts any one hearing, and that's worth remembering. Threaded through it all was the chairman, Tim Walberg, who opened and closed the hearing and set its frame. The chairman's framing was that this is about protecting standards and taxpayers, not targeting anyone, and that oversight of federally supported schools is Congress doing its job. Critics of the hearing saw the framing itself as loaded. The fair read is that a chairman always sets the terms, and a careful viewer listens for where the frame is fair and where it quietly assumes the conclusion. So let's total it up honestly on both sides of the room. On the critic's side, the principle that ability comes first is sound, and after the 2023 ruling, asking whether schools comply is fair. But the claim that today's doctors are less competent isn't supported by the board-passed data. On the defender's side, the access benefits of a varied profession are real, though the broadest outcome claims are still debated. The truth is split across both. None of this tells you where to land. You can insist that competence come first and also accept that, among qualified applicants, reaching underserved patients is a legitimate goal. Those aren't opposites, and treating merit and diversity as a pure either-or is where most of the heat and least of the light came from. Give each side its due. The critics are right that standards for doctors must stay high and that a court ruling has to be followed. The defenders are right that a doctor shortage in underserved areas is real and that a broader pipeline helps fill it. A viewer who holds both understands this hearing better than one who only cheers a side. And notice the common ground hiding under the fight. Everyone said patient safety comes first. Everyone said the country needs more doctors, especially in rural and poorer areas. The honest disagreement is narrow: which specific programs actually serve those shared goals and which are just labels. That's a fixable, factual argument if anyone wants to have it. It's worth naming the political weather honestly on both sides. Some critics are raising real questions about standards, and some are using medicine as a stage in a broader culture fight. Some defenders are protecting evidence-based programs, and some are defending anything with the right label. The cynicism runs both ways, and separating the sincere argument from the performance is most of the work here. And here's the quietly reassuring part under all the heat. The American doctor remains, by global standards, extremely well trained, and the licensing gauntlet, years of exams and supervised practice, catches problems long before anyone reaches your bedside. Whatever happens in the admissions fight, that back-end safety net is robust, which is worth remembering when the rhetoric suggests the whole system is one decision from collapse. So where does it leave us? With a real doctor shortage, a real duty to keep standards high, and a real question about how to reach patients who don't have enough physicians. A serious country can protect competence and widen access at the same time, and this hearing is a good argument for why it should try. Watch three things from here, and the first is the data. Whether board pass and licensing rates stay high as admissions change after the court ruling. That single measure is the clearest test of whether standards actually moved in either direction. Second, the specifics. Whether the debate moves from the blanket word DEI to the actual programs, so a rural scholarship and a disputed training module get judged on their own merits instead of one label. Precision is how this stops being a shouting match. And third, the shortage. Whether any of this actually gets more doctors into the rural and underserved places that need them, because that's the goal both sides claimed. If the fight over words leaves those communities with the same shortage, then nobody in that room really won. Those answers will come, on the record. The shortage won't shrink because a hearing ran hot, and no standard is protected by a slogan. The work is in the data, the specifics, and the patient still waiting for a doctor, and that's where we'll keep watching. That is our breakdown. Stay with us.